Hi there. The House of the Dragon top writers just did the usual tie-in interviews with Entertainment Weekly to accompany the release of the full and final trailer for Season 2. And unfortunately, there wasn't really much new information at all in these print interviews, compared to the sweeping details we got in the interviews leading up to Season 1. Though that's expected, it's the start of an entirely new show versus a new season. They don't want to give too many spoilers, except for exactly one thing. That in all the accompanying text interviews, there was one thing that stood out. A vague and bizarrely worded comment that writer Sarah Hess made about how much the Starks are actually in Season 2. And more specifically, Cregan Stark's bastard half-sister, Sarah Snow. So let me read this off. Sarah Hess, Condell's main writing partner on House of the Dragon, tempers expectations for what plays out on the show. Expect very little, she says, of Sarah Snow. Our POV is the Targaryens, and our POV is split between King's Landing, Dragonstone, and then when Daemon goes to Harrenhal. We just don't have the eyes to really be everywhere at the same time. So, point of this video is, how much is Sarah Snow actually in this TV show? And is she in it at all? Now, because this is vaguely worded, some like winteriscoming.net posted this at the title of their news post was Sarah Snow has been cut. I'm not sure what Hess meant by that. Because why bother doing a promotional interview and bothering to bring up Sarah Snow in it only to dismiss her? And that phrasing, expect very little, is not the same as expect none. And it's not just, don't get me wrong, it's not just what Hess said about Sarah Snow in particular, but the broader claim it made about Season 2 as a whole, that our POV is the Targaryens, and it is split between King's Landing, Dragonstone, and Harrenhal. Because literally the next paragraph in the Entertainment Weekly article, stress this, I did not splice these two screenshots together. This is literally the next paragraph. Condell does reiterate that Season 2 feels much more global than Season 1, and he was personally struck by the sets for Winterfell. For me, seeing the North in this show and how it was built really got to me, he says. Those were the first characters that I read about 25 years ago when I found the books of Martin's The Song of Ice and Fire series, and here I was now standing on set with them in a show that I co-created. It was mind-blowing to me. So, we're getting conflicting messages. Very conflicting messages. Because showrunner Ryan Condell has stressed that the world is widening out in Season 2. Not for the first time, even in the last set of interviews for the last teaser, he stressed that we'll even be seeing the other high towers, that we see Alicent's brother Gwaine will appear prominently for the first time, that he's very different from Otto's branch in the capital, that he's a bit more honorable. And also the promo videos, they say every time the world feels so much bigger. I remember Liv Cook saying that, but in terms of that you're meeting new people in new places, they were stressing that, and the writers, Brian Condell very specifically, more than once has stressed this. There are new characters and locations. Not just, we see Harrenhal a little more. Now, obviously, not on the same scale as Game of Thrones at its height. This multi-continent spanning story with a dozen major POV characters spread out in half a dozen major but separate storylines. It's not that. But for House of the Dragon Season 2, we can confirm the story is widening out and introducing more of the other great houses. Not as main characters, not on the level of Rhaenyra or Alicent, but prominent secondary characters. We know we're getting Cregan Stark. We know we're getting Jane Eyre. There was big news about when the first photo leaked out for her. More of the Hightowers, as I said. More of the Riverlords. In the teaser, you can see they're building up the Blackwoods and Brackens. And even more the Crownlander houses, that they're bothering to differentiate between, like, the Stokeworths and Rosbys just through their heraldry. I don't expect them to be major characters on the level of Cregan and Jane, but we're getting the Starks and Aarons. And thinking on it, they must be devoting a significant amount of time to Winterfell if, as Condell describes, they built a physical set for it. Think on that. We also know they built a large physical set for the Wall with the Night's Watch. That is not a digital set. The ice trenches, at least, those aren't digital. We know all this from spy photos, and they didn't need to do that. Time and again, under Ryan Condell's administration, which is actually competent now, they've stressed how much they prided themselves on not building sets they didn't need relative to their little use, that appeared too briefly to justify actually building them, that it made more sense to use the green screen virtual set. Case in point, Storm's End. Appears in only 2 episodes, just the main hall. They said, we'll just put a digital set around the actors. It isn't worth physically building this. And a lot of people didn't notice it was a digital set, because it doesn't really appear that frequently in Season 1. So compare that Storm's End was a digital set. Winterfell, we have Condell describing, I was walking around in a physical set we built. That we have spy photos of the wall, top of the wall set they built. I don't think they rebuilt Castle Black, don't get me wrong, because you could just use an interior soundstage for the interior of the hall. You don't need to build the courtyard again, I get that, but they devoted significant time and energy into building physical sets for Winterfell. I don't think we're going back to Pentos and the Dothraki Sea and Karth or anything, but it's wider than, oh, it's just King's Landing, Dragonstone, and now Harrenhal. Didn't even mention Driftmark, and we know Driftmark, we see the docks more in the trailers of Rhaenyra talking to him at the docks, even though we tend to treat Driftmark and Dragonstone as they're neighboring islands, but even so, it was really bizarre for Hess to stress it's just these 3 things. And I was worried for a moment she meant, oh, we're cutting down on Winterfell. Next paragraph, Condell is saying how much significant time they devoted to realizing Winterfell. On the other hand, and I have to admit this, and pay attention here, we have to admit that just because Jace's storyline with Cregan and the Night's Watch has been drastically expanded, that we know Winterfell's been expanded, we know we're getting zombies again, the White Walkers, that doesn't inherently necessarily mean that they felt they should include Sara Snow. Like, you could expand Jason Cregan going after zombies, but cut Sara Snow because you felt it was a tangent. Even regardless of runtime. That could have been an adaptation decision. Another issue specific to Sara Snow is the unreliable narrator element. Big section here. She's only mentioned on exactly 1 page of Fire and Blood. Though, of course, it's a history book, so 1 page can contain sweeps of time, but the in-universe historians openly debate whether Sara Snow even existed. So I could see them cutting a character who the source material says we're not even sure if she was a real person, or this is a myth. That of the 3 main historical sources, there's the pro-Alicent one, and there's the pro-Rhaenyra one. Neither of them mention Sara Snow. The only one that does is the very unreliable, ribald account of the court jester, the dwarf Mushroom. So he is very unreliable, he makes up a lot of stuff. He's the only one who even claims that Sara existed, and he goes on to say that Sara and Jace had a torrid love affair, and made love in the snows, in front of the heart tree of Winterfell in view of the gods, and that they even married, that he goes on to say they were married in the Winterfell Godswood. Now, the present-day historian writing Fire and Blood, the conceit that it's an in-universe history book, The present-day historian is Archmaester Gildane, George R. R. Martin's stand-in, who's weighing these three rival sources of, well, the pro-Allison version says this, the pro-Rhaenyra version says this. Once or twice, Mushroom introduces an intriguing possibility, but they know he's a teller of tall tales. Gildane weighs in on the implausibility of what Mushroom said, and he points out that all descriptions of Jace indicate it wasn't in his character to have sex with a random girl. It would be like the Honorable Robb Stark having sex with a random minor lordling's daughter or something. It doesn't make sense. He was an honorable man. And particularly because of his betrothal to Baela, that he was this guy obsessed with being this honorable model crown prince because he was insecure about he was probably a bastard. And the allegations of that. So, at the end of this, Gildane concludes by acknowledging, he does generously acknowledge that, Sara Snow could plausibly have existed in the sense I can't disprove she existed. He points out that, well, the historical record never mentions her in the chronicles, but then again, it is normal for the great houses don't tend to record bastards, particularly bastard daughters. They just wouldn't write about those in their chronicles and the local inventories and histories or whatever. So he says it doesn't really prove anything that the local histories don't describe her, or letters or anything. They tend to avoid talking about them. So he says, well, she could have existed because we don't tend to have records of those. And he even goes so far as to say, I can't disprove that young blood runs hot. Maybe Jace, as a young man, had a one-night fling with Sara Snow, if she even existed. But the idea that, above and beyond that, he would break a marriage betrothal and important alliance with the Velaryons by marrying Sara Snow in the rite of the old gods. He says that might be Mushroom outright exaggerating. So, fans of the book have been debating this for a couple of years now of what exactly happened because of Sara Snow and the unreliable narrator thing. It's this spectrum from she didn't exist at all to she was Jace's common-law wife. It's what happened, and the truth is somewhere in between. I personally, and a lot of fans, while we doubted that Jace would break his betrothal because that would screw up politics and stuff, I kind of always thought he'd have this one-night romantic fling with Sara Snow. Or that she'd be making eyes at him. There's gradations of this. Did she exist? Then was she attracted to him? Did he reciprocate? Did they actually have sex? And did they get married? These are all stages of questions that I thought we'd get a brief 1 or 2 episode romance in there. And you're asking, well, it's only 2 episodes. Like Star Trek, how many times did Kirk have a really good romance that was like with a 1 episode character? Or other various Star Trek runs where there's this really good romance of just the planet of the week, and it left a really strong impression. So I never thought, oh, he married her in the Godswood, but I thought there'd be like this romance for like 2 episodes while he was visiting there, or at least attraction. Now, what I suspect, or at least hope is happening here, is that writer Sarah Hess is overcompensating. Hess has misspoken in interviews before, and I'm not blaming her. I like Sarah Hess. Having seen all the other interviews where they say she wrote most of the Rhaenyra and Alicent dialogue in season 1. I don't just mean their interactions, I mean even individually in their own subplots, that because she's the top female writer, they gave her final pass on the writing for the female leads. And she's done a lot of really good things, and overall I like what she's done. And there were some rough patches here and there with like the Rhaenys coming up through the floor in episode 9, but there wasn't source material. We asked them, can you beef up Rhaenys by inventing something? Can we reasonably ask that of a writer when, well, there isn't really source material, I'll have to try to think of something when there isn't source material. But Hess has overstated things before, and either that or like the way she talks, the interviewer misinterprets because you're trying to deal with both ends of the spectrum of people think in black and white of, oh, so she's a major character. No. Oh, so she's not in it at all. No. I'm trying to give you a measured response. But just, I think Hess, I can see how a reasonable person could fall into this trap. That my suspicion, or at least hope, is that Hess is worried that TV-only viewers with no knowledge of the books assume the Starks and Lannisters are going to be main cast members, POV characters, when they're not. Like, every time in season one, like, when briefly a Stark would be on screen in the premiere, Rickon, Creedon's father, or that Tyland and Jason, well, they're recurring, but I wouldn't call them on the level of Alicent or Otto or something. They're not that big, but they're present. But that people were expect for when you see the live reactions from non-book readers, they were reading, are they going to do stuff? Are they going to be a major thing now? That anyone who's read Fire and Blood recognizes that they're not big. They're not big POV characters, though they are prominent. Case in point, Tyland and Jason in season 1, I felt got a decent amount of screen time, purely in terms of a TV show, and actually increased a little relative to that point in the books. Like, we know Tyland is on the small council, but that they invented that Jason is prominently at this invented royal hunt, offering Rhaenyra's hand. That was better than what the book did, and I felt they had a decent amount of screen time. But I would still stress to someone, they're in it, but temper your expectations that the POVs are the Targaryens. This is an accurate statement. So I think that when she said temper your expectations, we don't spend that much time with Sara Snow. I think what Hess meant is that relatively she was stressing to a TV-only audience, don't get hyped up that Sara Snow is the new Arya, or that Cregan is the new Robb Stark. Which, as a book reader, I fully agree that they're not. I would stress, because a lot of people really, get on the hype train for this, I would say to someone else, don't get hyped up that Sara Snow is the new Arya. She isn't. But I thought she would appear prominently in like 2 episodes, then never be seen again, and might be making eyes at Jace, maybe even kiss him. Who knows? So I think that this might just be the telephone game of miscommunication, that you do need to stress to non-book readers they're not the main characters of this. The Targaryens are. When I say POVs, they describe this as if it was fully narrativized the way that A Song of Ice and Fire was, that the way Arya is a POV narrator, that if Fire and Blood was narrativized, Alicent would be the POV for small council scenes on the Green Council. Tyland Lannister would not be. He's a character within her POV storyline, but he's still present. And I don't want them to act like we're excluding them. Similarly, the other example I've used is they're about as prominent as like Marjorie Tyrell or Theon Greyjoy. Not the best analogy because Theon later becomes a POV, but that she was, the way she said it, it sounds like Winterfell isn't even in it that much, which contradicts like the visual info of the trailers, or Condal saying we built Winterfell. And they might just not want to use Sara Snow for characterization purposes. Why would Jace have sex with this girl? I think she'll at least be on screen. Whether she has a relationship with him is something else entirely, but unreliable narrator nature of the source material, I wouldn't have a problem with that. A lot of this was us reading into it. Final thing, has there been any sort of casting leak or news about Sara Snow? Not by name, and there are no spy photos, but as I've said before, purely based on the appearance of actresses who we know are in the show but don't know who they're playing, there are 2 strong candidates to be Sara, and they might both be wrong. Either Erica Ford or Raffaella Chapman. Though I really strongly think it's Erica Ford. The Chapman has this sort of mysterious waifish look. But Erica Ford, you look at a photo and go, this really looks like she's an ancestor of Maisie Williams. So I think Erica Ford is Sara Snow. I could be wrong. and how prominent is she, but that they'd at least name drop it as an Easter egg. This is a show that mentioned Joanna Swan being kidnapped and sold into slavery in Lease by the crab feeder in episode 3. You think they wouldn't name drop Sarah Snow, or at least have her have a cameo? So I was worried, everyone was worried when we were looking at this quote the other day, going, what the heck are you talking about? What Hess said even contradicts what Condell was saying. So if you were dead set on, there are people, the clickbaiters, saying, spreading what they know to be false rumors that, oh, she's going to marry Jace, and she's going to have a pet direwolf, which is something that never happens. And on top of that, then the people going, oh, and Jace, simultaneously, that Jace will have a gay love affair with Cregan. The same clickbaiters also claim he will marry Sarah Snow. Which is it? Is this some sort of Challengers situation that Sarah's got going on with Jace and her own brother? It doesn't make sense. Come on. So I'm not sure what to expect. And the other thing was the leaker account, well, spy analyst who's been very accurate, Wake the Dragon, who's a combination of House of the Dragon Croatia and House of the Dragon Greece. For a couple hours there, they said, oh yeah, there's also, yes, Jace is going to be doing stuff with Cregan. And I was like, what? And you haven't mentioned this before. And then an hour later came back and said, oh, I was just yanking your chain. And don't joke about that. If that's serious. Either it is or it is. Don't, with all this BLAO3 stuff. If you're going to do it, be serious about this. Don't just say it as a joke. Point is, I think Sarah Snow will exist in the show. It's just how much will she exist, and there isn't that much source material. She isn't that big of a character. The source even says there's possible she didn't exist. I think we're going to at least get her in like 2 episodes. It's a question of how much will we get her.